The River's Curse, a tale of blood and darkness. The river first turned red on a Sunday. Elias Granger, the town's retired ferryman, was the first to notice. His weathered boots sank into the muddy bank as he stood at the edge, his eyes squinting into the early morning fog. What he saw wasn't a trick of light. It was thick, dark, and crawling. The water had turned to blood. Not rust red. Not some muddy silt. Actual blood, dark, oozing, clotted in places like it had been drawn fresh from 1,000 veins. Elias dipped his hand in, trembling. It came out slick and warm. He smelled it. Rotting iron and death. The river pulsed. Something beneath the surface twisted, like a vein twitching under skin. He backed away, but it was too late. That night, he began vomiting worms and thick black bile, and by dawn, he was dead, his skin torn from the inside out, his eyes melted into the back of his skull. The townsfolk of Halgrave whispered of sulfur in the rocks, pollution from upriver. But no scientist came. No one answered their calls. Phones stopped working. GPS glitched and rewound like broken clocks. By the third day, every fish floated belly up, bloated and eyeless. Crows pecked at them and fell from the sky, twitching. Children dared each other to touch the water. One boy, Daniel, went in up to his knees. He screamed, fell backward, and tore at his legs. His skin sloughed off in long strips like wet paper, revealing raw, exposed muscle. He died with his mouth open in a soundless cry, his teeth cracked and bleeding. And still, the river pulsed. It throbbed at night like it had a heartbeat, and in the silence, people began hearing whispers. Low. Calling. Intimate. They'd wake to find wet footprints on their floors. Blood-slick handprints on their windows. The smell of raw meat soaked in swamp water. Father Colburn, the village priest, claimed it was judgment. That something buried deep had been disturbed, something that fed on flesh and worship. He stood at the river's edge one night, arms open, chanting Latin verses to cast the devil back. The next morning, his body was found hanging upside down from the old willow tree, his spine bent backward, mouth sewn shut with veins torn from his own wrists. Everyone stopped drinking the water. But it was too late. They'd all already drunk it. And now, the blood wouldn't stop. It didn't flow downriver anymore. It spread upstream, through the soil, through the wells, seeping into the dreams of the villagers. The river was no longer a source of life. It had become a vein. And something ancient was beginning to pulse inside it. By the end of the week, no one slept. At first, the whispers came only at night, soft, like distant voices carried on wind. But there was no wind, and the words were too clear. Not in any known language. More like wet, gurgling syllables slithered through unseen mouths. They echoed through the walls, the drains, the pipes, always closest to where water lingered. Old man Harker slit his own ears with a kitchen knife. Said the river kept calling him by name, over and over, lovingly, like a mother to her child. When the sheriff found him, he was laughing with two red cavities where his ears used to be, his head tilted toward the floor drain, listening. But the worst began when the bodies returned. 4 villagers had gone missing after venturing too close to the river, including Elias Granger's niece, June. People assumed they'd fled in fear. But then, one by one, they came back, dragged in by the current, pale and bloated, eyes wide open, mouth stretched unnaturally wide as if mid-scream. And they were smiling. The coroner, Dr. Lindell, examined them behind locked doors. She only lasted 6 hours before being found in her home with her jaw broken and mouth sewn into a smile, her throat stuffed with soaked river moss. Scribbled across her walls in blood were the words. We hear them. We welcome them. Let it in. Something was beneath the water. Moving. Watching. More than once, villagers swore they saw faces ripple on the river's surface, eyeless, gasping, writhing just beneath the crimson film like drowned things trying to push through. Then came the night screams. House after house was filled with shrieking, first one person, then entire families. They spoke in garbled voices, repeating words no one understood, clawing at their walls. One woman bashed her face into the mirror until it shattered, sobbing, "They're inside the walls. They're in the drains. They're coming through my eyes." She died with her hands knotted deep in her empty sockets, still twitching. The town's well, once pure, now dripped thick red sludge. Even those who refused to drink it began changing. Bleeding from the gums. Teeth falling out. Veins showing beneath pale, tightening skin. Pastor Ward tried to evacuate the children. He was found floating in the church baptismal font, face first, blood oozing from his nose, ears, and eyes, his Bible clutched so tightly it fused to his skin. The pages were soaked in blood. Every verse was gone, replaced with symbols that seemed to crawl when stared at too long. Something ancient had risen. Not just in the river, but in the minds of the people. And it was hungry. The dead began to walk at midnight. It started with Elias Granger. His grave, shallow and hastily dug behind the chapel, was found torn open from the inside. Splinters of his coffin lay scattered like bones, and long drag marks carved the mud, leading toward the river. No footprints. Just claw marks, deep gouges in the earth like something had crawled on broken limbs. Mrs. Donnelly swore she saw Elias at her window that night. He was dripping wet, his skin gray and sagging. His jaw hung loose, broken. His eyes had dissolved, leaving hollow sockets that bled a slow, syrupy red. He didn't speak. He only knocked. Once. Twice. 13 times. Then he vanished, leaving a bloody handprint smeared across the glass, fingers unnaturally long, nails black and jagged like rusted fishhooks. By morning, 3 more graves were empty. Their occupants, previously sealed beneath 6 feet of earth, had returned to Rome. Not alive. Not human. But something, close. They moved with broken limbs, bones cracking as they bent in ways no body should. They smiled, always smiled, even when their faces tore from the strain. And they came for the living. They appeared at doorways, in hallways, at the foot of beds. They didn't run. They didn't speak. They simply stood. Dripping. Watching. Then came the screams. Each night, more were taken. Dragged into the river. The blood water surged when they were pulled in, and afterward, the river grew darker, thicker, less like liquid and more like molten flesh. People tried to fight back. One man, Carl Trenner, shot his wife in the head after she returned from the river, soaked and smiling. She got up anyway. The bullet had gone straight through her temple, but she only tilted her head, crooked and twitching, and whispered in a voice that sounded like gurgling water. "Come see what I've seen." He screamed as she tore out his tongue and fed it to the river. Soon, survivors gathered in the church, boarding windows and sealing doors. But even within those walls, the air was wet and heavy. The walls sweated red. The floorboards bled if you stepped too hard. And at night, they could hear them, the dead, outside, scratching at the stone with rotting nails, humming some ancient lullaby. Father Brenner, desperate to save his flock, opened the old Bible. But the pages were now blank. He turned page after page until, finally, there was only one phrase scrawled at the end, in something that pulsed like a living wound. "They do not sleep, because sleep is for the forgiven. And none are forgiven here." Outside, the dead were gathering. They didn't knock anymore. They waited. Because the river had risen again. And it was time to feed. The bells rang at 3:33 a.m. No one had touched them. The tower was sealed. The ropes had been cut days ago. Still, the bells tolled 13 times, each ring deeper than the last, vibrating through bone and blood. Outside, the river overflowed its banks. But it wasn't water that spilled. It was bodies. Soaked corpses crawled up the streets in unison, some missing limbs, others little more than skeletons wrapped in pulp. Yet their eyes, if they still had eyes, glowed red beneath lids that no longer blinked. They chanted, not with voices, but with the grinding of teeth and the sloshing of blood in their throats. Inside the church, the survivors cowered behind pews, clutching crucifixes and rusted tools. Father Brenner knelt at the altar, weeping into blood-soaked vestments. Then, suddenly, he stopped. His lips parted. His voice changed. Low. Wet. Not his own. The drowned one has risen. Let the rites begin. He rose, head tilted back, eyes rolled white, and opened his arms wide. From his sleeves poured water, thick, congealed, moving like living tissue. It crept across the altar, down the steps, and toward the people. Mrs. Kilroy screamed as it touched her feet. Her legs burst open with blisters, skin dissolving like acid had been poured down her bones. The water slithered into her mouth, and her scream turned into a gargling hit. More of them fell. One by one, the blood took them, crawling inside their mouths, their eyes, their wounds. They rose again, soaked and smiling, chanting. We are baptized in rot. We are bound in blood. We are the river. Thomas, a teenager who had lost his parents 2 nights before, grabbed a rusted iron cross from the altar and struck Father Brenner across the face. The priest's head split open like wet fruit, revealing a tongue-like worm writhing beneath his skin, lined with human teeth. It hissed, lunged, and Thomas fled through the back door, leaving the church behind as it filled with screams, then silence, then low, ritualistic moaning. Outside, the streets bled. Blood flowed through cracks in the pavement, along walls, into homes. It wasn't just in the river now. It had roots. Veins. Purpose. Thomas ran past drowned townsfolk kneeling in circles, whispering to the air, carving symbols into their own flesh with river rocks. One mother held her baby, both with empty eye sockets, cooing to something hovering above them, invisible but felt, like teeth pressed just beneath the skin of reality. Above the church, a red light bled from the sky like a second sun. And in the middle of the river, something massive began to rise. Not with splashes. Not with waves. But with worship. The rites of the drowned had begun. And the drowned one had finally opened its eyes. The river split open like torn flesh. From its bubbling surface rose a thing older than death, a tower of writhing limbs, slick with rot and blood. Its form was impossible, always shifting, too massive to exist, too horrifying to name. What might have been a face was a cluster of gasping mouths, each screaming in languages not spoken in this world. Its eyes, dozens of them, bled constantly, pouring streams of red that hissed as they hit the ground. People collapsed in worship. They tore out their own eyes to offer. They slit their veins and whispered praises with their last breath. The drowned one had come not just to feed, but to cleanse, to baptize the world in its blood and memory. Thomas watched from a rooftop, trembling. Everywhere below him, the townspeople danced in the river, now thick as jelly, their flesh sloughing off as they embraced one another, their bodies merging together, mouth to shoulder, hand to thigh, until they were one seething mass of bone and muscle, singing. The hymn echoed through the air. We drink from the ancient womb. We are the river. We are undone. In the distance, church bells tolled again. But the church was gone, consumed, pulled into the earth, replaced by a pulsing hole from which black tendrils reached skyward, wrapping the clouds like fingers. The sky turned red, not like a sunset, but like an infected eye, swollen and boiling. The drowned one moved. Its limbs stretched toward the town square, dragging behind it a wake of whispering fog. Every light went out. Every breath of wind stopped. And those who hadn't joined the blood mass began to change. One man clutched his head, sobbing. His scalp split. A second face pushed through, his dead wife's face, laughing as her mouth unhinged to reveal rows of river teeth. A child screamed as her skin peeled back, revealing black veins writhing like worms underneath. She didn't die. She smiled, eyes empty, and skipped straight into the river's mouth. The town had become a wound. And the drowned one was the infection. Thomas could hear it now. Inside his head. The chanting. It was constant. Wet. Slippery. It told him secrets. Promised release. Promised rebirth. All he had to do was let go. He pressed his hands to his ears and screamed, but the blood in his veins pulsed in time with the chant. It was inside him. It was inside everything. Beneath the earth. Above the sky. Within the blood. And as the drowned one's mouths opened wider, the clouds began to rain teeth, and the river began to whisper his name. Thomas ran. Not toward safety, there was none, but toward the only place left untouched, the old tunnel beneath the mill. A place sealed off for decades, whispered to be cursed even before the river turned red. He had no choice. The town above was devouring itself. The drowned one had grown. Its limbs now stretched across rooftops, puppeteering corpses like marionettes, mouths hanging open as if waiting to speak, but only bleeding. Its eyes watched everything. Its tongues, wet and barbed, licked the sky. And its mouth, gaping in the river's center, waited for him. The tunnel swallowed him whole. Inside, it was colder. Quieter. The air stank of iron and decay, and walls pulsed with veins, living, twitching, leaking dark mucus. He moved deeper, past rusted machinery and old stone, until he saw them. Bodies. Hundreds. Mummified, fused to the walls. Their faces frozen in screams, skin stretched tight. Some had no faces at all, just holes where mouths and eyes had been, like they'd been sucked out. He tried not to look. Tried not to hear. But the walls whispered. Come closer. A low hum began, vibrating in his skull. With every step, memories not his own flooded his mind, drownings, rituals, blood-soaked orgies beneath moons that never existed. His nose bled. His teeth ached. He dropped to his knees, retching black water. Then came the door. Massive, rusted, carved with symbols that moved when he stared too long. At its center, a circular hole, pulsing like a heart. He reached for it without meaning to, compelled by something inside him, something older than his own thoughts. The hole bit him. A jagged edge sank into his hand, tearing skin and muscle. Blood spilled, and the door drank it greedily. It opened with a sound like 1,000 ribs snapping. Inside was the source. A pit. Endless. Breathing. It pulsed with a sound that wasn't sound, more a pressure, a command. From its depths rose a shape, a thing of bones, skin, and teeth, a fetus the size of a cathedral, curled and twitching, blind but aware. The unborn God. The drowned one's true form. Thomas screamed, but no sound came. The fetus opened its mouth, a vertical slit that stretched from belly to forehead, and sang. The song shattered stone. His bones vibrated. His skin cracked. Visions filled his head, humanity drowned, not in water, but in flesh. A world reborn in blood and silence. No death. No life. Just endless, sacred rot. He stumbled backward, but the pit had no end. His foot slipped. And he fell. Down through the screaming dark. Into the mouth of madness. Thomas plunged into liquid agony. It wasn't water. It wasn't blood. It was alive. A womb of heat and decay that clung to his skin like 1,000 tiny mouths, licking, biting, whispering secrets into his pores. He couldn't breathe. The fluid filled his lungs, but he didn't drown. He changed. His body twisted as if being rewritten, his bones stretching, skin melting like wax and reforming. He screamed, but the sound echoed only inside his skull. Then the voices began. You are chosen. You are vessel. You are rot made flesh. He floated weightless in the drowned one's sacred bile, watching memories not his own flash before him, villagers from centuries ago, sacrificing children to the river, a priest drinking from a chalice of still beating hearts, lovers whispering prayers into each other's wounds as the flood consumed them. He was all of them now. He was the memory of every soul ever swallowed. The bile birthed him back into a cavern, deep below the town, beneath even the foundations of the world. Its walls were made of flesh, throbbing, wet, and translucent. Through them he saw thousands of writhing shadows, all with his face, all screaming silently. At the center of the chamber, the throne. Made of bone. Alive. And upon it sat a figure with no skin, raw muscle and nerves pulsing in time with the river above. Its face was a mirror. A perfect reflection of Thomas, except the eyes were black voids, and the mouth never stopped smiling. The creature rose. You are reborn, it whispered. A son of the flood. A priest of the pulsing womb. Thomas tried to reject it. To run. But his legs moved on their own, stepping toward the throne as if pulled by hooks in his spine. The figure embraced him. And they merged. Flesh to flesh. Thought to thought. Thomas felt himself slipping, screaming, drowning in memories he never made. And at last, silence. Not peace, submission. He sat upon the throne now. He saw the town above from the drowned one's eyes. Watched as the church twisted into a tower of wet stone and sinew. Listened to the townspeople, now nothing but gurgling husks, baptizing the newborn in rivers of pus. He saw the world beyond. It was spreading. Blood seeping through cracks in reality. Dreams infected. Oceans rising, not with water, but with a consciousness made of teeth and grief. The world would not burn. It would soften, like meat, until all was digestible. And in the pit of the earth, Thomas smiled. Because he no longer feared. He understood. There was no death. Only the great digestion. And he had been baptized. In rot. The air was thick with a pulsing heat, the scent of blood clinging to everything, suffocating. Above, the town continued to disintegrate, its bones turning to sludge, its screams muffled beneath the weight of the river's presence. The drowned one's heart beat louder than any bell. Thomas sat at the throne of flesh, his new form a grotesque mockery of humanity, skinning, fluid, slipping through every crack in the world. His hands were no longer his own, but clawed appendages, each digit an extension of the river's will. Above, the sky cracked open, a jagged gash in the fabric of reality, spilling more than just blood. Tears. Realms tore at the seams as the world became a feast for something far older than the flood. He had been called to preach. Not to the living. They were past saving. The flood had consumed them. Their sins were their flesh, and now, only bones and dreams remained. But the souls who hadn't been claimed, those who clung to their final thoughts, would hear him. The crimson sermon would begin. His body stretched, the flesh of the throne slithering behind him as if drawn by invisible strings. He stood, stepping forward into the void, the river parting at his feet like the sea before a god. The walls of the pit shook, the hearts of the dead beating in rhythm with his own. He spoke. The words came not from his mouth, but from the river, from the blood, from the vast, uncountable dark. We are the flood. We are the final truth. We are reborn in the great rot, where there is no death, no end. Only the beginning of hunger. The beginning of eternity. His voice reverberated through the earth, shaking it, causing cracks to form where the river had once flowed. It spread through the dying town above, waking the last of the villagers, those who had once escaped, and pulling them to the flood. They came, not walking, but crawling. Their skin had turned ashen, the river staining their bodies like tattoos. Eyes wide, mouths open, they muttered prayers of the drowned, their lips splitting open with each word. The town had become pulp. What was once solid ground was now a mixture of bones, dirt, and congealed blood. The church that had once stood proud was now sinking, consumed by the river's endless hunger. The survivors did not scream. They didn't need to. The river had already taken their souls, their fear, their thoughts. They only had their flesh now. The river would claim that next. Thomas's smile stretched unnaturally. He was the river now. As he walked among them, their eyes glazed, they fell to their knees, offering themselves to him, their bodies breaking into liquid as if they were already part of the flood, becoming one with it. His voice echoed over them as they disintegrated. Let the flood cleanse you. And then, as his body began to dissolve into the river, the ground crumbled beneath him, and the town, the world, sank. No one was left. The flood had consumed it all. The flood had claimed them all. The world was gone. No ground. No sky. Just an endless stretch of black water, swirling with the weight of centuries. The flood had not just consumed the town, it had devoured everything. It was not a river anymore, it was a void, a realm, a ceaseless, pulsing existence where time no longer had meaning. Thomas floated, weightless, his body now one with the flood. He had become part of it, fused with its endless hunger, its insatiable will. He could feel the river's consciousness in every drop, in every current, ancient, patient, and eternal. It had waited. And now, it owned him. His mind was a blur, but deep in the murk, he remembered something distant, a past life, a fleeting thought. It was the sound of the church bell. A hollow, distant ringing, calling to him. But the bell was not for salvation. It was for something else. The final toll. The endless drown had begun. The flood was not just a physical thing, it was an all-encompassing truth. It was the act of sinking, of being absorbed, of becoming nothing but the water itself. His form continued to stretch, his limbs dissolving, each part of him turning into liquid and vapor. And yet, he could still feel. He could feel the emptiness of the world. The dead had been claimed, their bones sinking into the dark, and even the skies above had turned to a sluggish, blood-red haze, as if time itself was choking on the flood's vastness. The earth had ceased to matter. Life and death were the same, consumed in the eternal cycle of the river. Far beneath, in the depths, the drowned one stirred. It was no longer just a god, it was the flood, the force of all things collapsing into one endless, suffocating mass. The drowned one whispered through the water, its voice wrapped around Thomas's mind, pulling him deeper into the abyss. You will never escape, it promised. You will never drown. You will never rise. You will never be whole again. The flood took him further. His body split, became part of the current, but his consciousness stayed. It was endless, his mind, his soul, his self, all disintegrating into the great maw of the river. The drowned did not die. They did not sleep. They simply became the river. Thomas could feel it now. He wasn't a man anymore. He wasn't a being. He was a vessel for the flood, for the endless, suffocating black. And in the river, he understood. There was no end. There was no release. No salvation. There was only the drowned. Thomas no longer existed. The concept of self had been lost in the flood. He was now one with the river's ceaseless churn, a part of an endless current that stretched across time and space, devouring everything in its path. His thoughts had long since dissolved into the murky, stagnant water, and now, only the rhythm of the river echoed in his consciousness. It was a rhythm that could not be escaped. The river called to him, whispered to him, as it had whispered to all of them. The drowned ones. The lost souls. The ones who had sunk into this nightmare of endless dissolution. They were not gone. They were here. Every one of them, their bodies floating like ghostly remnants beneath the surface, their voices muted but still alive in the flood. It was not death. It was a new existence. One without time, without meaning, without hope. But even in the depths, something shifted. The flood grew darker. The current, once steady and eternal, began to swell, becoming more violent. It thrashed and twisted as though something had awakened, something far older than the flood itself. The waters churned and writhed like an angry beast, pulling at his essence, pulling at the very fabric of the river. Thomas felt it. The drowned one was growing restless. It no longer whispered. It roared. "You belong to me," it screamed, its voice echoing through every fiber of his being. "You are the blood. You are the flood. You are the end and the beginning." The river thrashed harder, ripping at his form, dragging him deeper, pulling him into the very heart of its madness. But something else lurked beneath the surface, a darkness older than the drowned one, older than the river, older than time itself. Thomas felt it rising. A force that had been waiting in the depths. Waiting for the flood to claim its prize. It was not a god. It was something far worse. As the river reached its peak, as the very ground beneath the water cracked, the final current surged, pushing Thomas, no, whatever was left of him, toward the mouth of the abyss. He could feel it, the opening, the place where the river ended and the void began. The place where nothing could escape. And as he was pulled toward it, Thomas understood the truth. The flood was not the end. It was not even the beginning. It was the forever, the eternal, the all-consuming force that would never stop, never cease. It would never end. And in the final moment before the void claimed him, Thomas realized. He wasn't drowning. He was being swallowed. Forever. The river had no end. And neither would he.